I'm only going to review 3 recent Christmas episodes of this year, just to limit myself and focus on my future schedules for the following year. I've been thinking about reviewing this episode since that this is the second time I'm talking about this show, but at the same time, watching this episode, it's good for being its own Christmas episode. I'm still taking my time with this show, especially with the premise of future Hailey, who is the professor. Believe me when I say this Disney cartoon is unique, but at the same time, the other uniqueness from other Disney cartoons are better, but that's mainly just me. The premise of this episode is that Hailey is creating a Christmas festival for people to sing on stage next to the beach. And considering that it doesn't snow in Florida, they had to do different traditions in order to celebrate Christmas. Granted, I never went to Florida during the Christmas season, but all I know is that it never snows in Florida since it's in the deep south. Hailey's future self, the professor, comes back to the past to greet her like usual, but unfortunately, she can't be able to go back without any power, and it would take a long time for her to get the power that she needs to go back to the future. However, when they activate a portal to the future, a reindeer comes into the future to alter the future. And to tell you the truth for how the future operates when it comes to Hailey's future self, Hailey has a lot to understand, especially the goals that she's been doing since realizing that the future is at stake if she doesn't do any of the goals. In order to prevent altering the future while getting the professor back into the future, Hailey and Scott need to perform the best Christmas festival ever, since that's what the professor showed to the people in her future what she did in the past. Since that the professor is in the 2000s and 70s. Yeah, it's implied that the professor is from the 2074 year, which is about 50 years later, depending on which year Hailey and Scott are in. But I gotta be really real with you that whenever I think about the future in this, I did say that it was promising and it's somewhat getting used to, but at the same time, my perspective towards this show just isn't the same as the other Disney Channel shows that I've talked about in the past. But at the same time, this episode did what it could, especially when it's trying this hard to make a Christmas episode a serious episode when it comes to the professor trying to get back to the future after coming from it. And with the episode focusing on the Christmas festival itself with the characters singing, it's honestly what makes this episode different from the other episodes that I've saw centering around Christmas. Granted, Christmas musicals exist, especially movies and cartoon episodes, but what really makes this episode unique is mainly the fact that Hailey is only doing this to celebrate Christmas, and since that this is actually part of her things of list that she needs to do to prevent the future, really shows that she's trying to make things right, but at the same time, her song on its own is really bad. Not the ending where the electricity went out, I meant the song that she made that she describes as simple, even though in reality she went overboard. I'm gonna be really honest with you, even though that she was offended at some points from her future self of how awful and bad it is, keep in mind, if she did perform while the music was going on towards the ending, the future would have been doomed. Be thankful that she wasn't performing right after the band that was considered the worst out of the multiple performances from other people in this Christmas festival, because if this band was second to worst when Hailey is the worst, then people will probably feel regretful for calling them one of the worst bands and not giving the band an encore. Well, technically they didn't say it's one of the worst bands, but at the same time, off screen is a possibility. But considering that this episode is focusing on making the best Christmas festival ever thanks to Hailey, it really shows that the focus of it all is mainly Hailey saving Christmas, but also saving the future of Christmas and the future that the professor, who is her older self, is from. Let me be really clear with you that even though that the song that Hailey sings isn't the most memorable, it's honestly the most wholesome songs when it comes to how it's executed. Believe me, the song on its own, with only the piano, really shows that this is a better song than what Hailey made early on. This episode, for being about Christmas festivals and mostly a musical at most, it really feels like that this episode didn't really need to be like every other Christmas episode to be wholesome. Well, aside from the ending, which is the song sung by Hailey. But for me personally, I felt like of what this episode is trying to accomplish on being its own thing when it comes to the execution really shows that this episode doesn't need to be like every other Christmas episode. Mainly of how the characters are portrayed, and it takes time for me to get used to the characters, mainly the main character, and the difference is that other than the road tripping episode that I talked about several months ago, they're taking the spirit of Christmas, of how the future is nothing without Christmas, from the way it's executed, but mainly it's taking place in Florida, but Hailey has a lot of responsibility, that it really feels like that she is Steven Universe 2.0, but at the same time, there are not a lot of magical elements in this, and it's mainly science fiction elements. Granted, Paradox does do technology like the Professor, but at the same time, the more we learn about the Professor as the series progresses, the more we realize of how Hailey's future on being the hero would definitely change her life so much. Granted, we already knew it to be the case, but believe me when I say this, every time I see Hailey in these episodes, she's improving, even though that she's mostly incompetent when it comes to these situations happening to her. I'm just saying for a fact that there's gonna come to a point that she's going to witness a scientific experiment that her future self went through that would probably lead to a lot of crazy hijinks when it comes to the hijinks that she went through in previous episodes, but scientific hijinks. But that's just mainly my prediction of this show. With that being said, even if this episode didn't win me over to watch more of this show, it still gave me predictions of what is going to happen in the future, mainly in the second season, along with the fact that it's a good Christmas episode for being its own thing, but I keep stating that compliment when it comes to other Christmas episodes and material that I've talked about over the last several years. When it comes to the next two Christmas episodes that were latest as of now, I'm gonna be reviewing one of them next week, while the other is gonna be saved on Christmas Eve, which you pretty much knew it's gonna be on the Sunday, but I'm not going to spoil what it is. I'm giving this episode a 7.5 out of 10.